Meanwhile, the next master of evil performs his task on foot.
Run! It's the radioactive man!
What's happened to Zemo's adhesive? The more I spray, the more victims I set free.
That's how we planned it, mister. The party's over.
Captain America, you dare to confront me?
My shield will stand against any foe when liberty and justice are threatened.
Bah! Your shield cannot stop my radioactivity. You are doomed.
Never before has Captain America faced a foe with the power of the radioactive man.
Hey, welcome back to the Fwooshcast. I'm your host, Tony. This week, my buddy Nick is out. Nick has what some people call a family, something like that, where he thinks it's more important to do things with his family and travel for work, whatever it is he's doing, than the Fwooshcast. Unacceptable. But he'll be back with us next time. Today, filling in for Nick, we have the one and only Paul, owner and master of the Fwoosh LLC. Paul, welcome to the Fwooshcast.
Thank you.
Paul, if you don't know, is an American living abroad in Denmark, where he's lived with his wife and family for some time. And so we've never had the chance to meet in person. He does come in for things like San Diego Comic-Con and stuff occasionally, but being on the East Coast, I've never been able to get out there. So I think it's going to be kind of fun to finally get to talk and hang out with Paul, especially since he's the one that makes the Fwoosh go around. So thanks for joining us, buddy.
Thanks for having me on. And actually, in 2009, I was in New York City for New York Comic Con.
Oh,
I think we missed each other for some reason.
I think we did. I think that was probably I definitely had been on the Fwoosh boards and a member of the Fwoosh by then for a while, but I don't know if I was really active on staff at the time. So, or that might have been just as I was starting to. So, and actually, 2000. I was at Comic-Con in 2008, but 2009, I think I was traveling on tour. So, because that would have been either, I think they had moved it to February by then.
Let's see. Yeah, they were still running in February at that time.
Yeah, because 2008 they had that was the one year they did April, which was fantastic. God, I wish they would go back to doing that. And I did go then, but yeah, so it was in February. I was probably in Minneapolis or somewhere, doing plays. But so we strangers in the night, and I'm sure one day, we'll hit the same city at the same time. But anyway, meanwhile, it's good to have you here, buddy.
Thanks.
And one of the benefits of being abroad is that you've come into some toys that we don't have here yet. And this week, just the other day, you posted a couple of picture galleries on the Fwoosh that had a lot of people jealous and envious. So we want to definitely talk about some of those. The first is the Marvel Legends 3-pack, which is a Target exclusive. And this is the pack that comes with Radioactive Man, I think it's safe to say is the star of this case. Also, Carol Danvers, I'm not sure what she's called on the package, Ms. Marvel, Captain Marvel, Warbird. And then the sort of a reissue of the Ultimate Captain America, but not a straight reissue. We'll get to that as well. You got these from an online site in the United Kingdom?
Yes, called Kapow Toys.
Excellent. And I checked the link, and it looks like you didn't actually pay. I mean, I don't know, who knows what you had to pay for shipping, but shipping aside, it looks like you didn't overpay too greatly compared to what these are supposed to retail for eventually in America.
I think I paid £49.59, which so
that's about $30 probably.
How much should I pay? I don't. You know what? Hold on. I have a tool here.
But I mean, even if I'm assuming that this is going to retail for at least $40 US when it hits Target. So
I thought I heard something about $59.99 at one point, or read something about that.
Wouldn't surprise me. I mean, when you figure that singly, Marvel Legends are now about $20, give or take $1, depending on your region and your retailer. So a 3-pack is it's safe to assume.
I paid $100.
Ah, well, there you go. So that sounds about right.
Yeah. Shipping actually wasn't that bad. It was about £80. So it was about $95, $94, and then with the shipping, it came out to about $100.
And you seem pretty happy from the write-up online. Pretty
Absolutely. Absolutely, and I'll be doing individual reviews this week for each character. I was just so excited to get these on Friday. It was like, woohoo, I got them. Take pictures, put it up. People care.
Yeah, and great pictures, too. What is Carol Danvers referred to as on this set?
It is Miss Marvel on the back of the box, and there's even a short description. I won't read that out. You guys can click on it yourselves. But on the front and on the back, it's Miss Marvel, which is interesting that they went with Miss Marvel and not Warbird.
Right, because that is costume-wise. Now, to go along with her new name in the comic books, she's now Captain Marvel, they also gave her a new costume.
Right.
So it would make sense that, okay, this is not the Captain Marvel costume, so it's not. But this is not actually the Ms. Marvel costume either. This is technically the Warbird costume. And that may be sort of a fan-favorite look for her. But it's interesting they went with Ms. Marvel. I guess anytime that they can get the Marvel name into somebody's name.
That works.
Yeah.
I would have to go back now, because you brought up an interesting point about Ms. Marvel versus Warbird.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm kind of thinking, I don't remember either costume.
Well, I'm pretty sure, and I know people are going to comment and write if I don't have this exactly right. What are you doing a comic toys podcast? You don't know anything. So pardon me if I don't have this exactly right, but if my memory serves, the Warbird identity, codename, and affiliated costume came about when the Kurt Busiek Volume 2 Avengers started after Hero's Return, and that was this costume that we're talking about with this figure, which is very similar to the costume she had previous to that, just slightly sort of streamlined and modified. But that is, if my memory serves, that's when she adopted the Warbird codename and this costume. So I don't know. Maybe we'll have to go and research the minutia of that. But.
Oh man, I'm going to have to go back and look. See, this is, and I know this is the thing where I know you got blasted last time in the last part. Oh, you're comic guys. All right, but Miss Marvel is a character from the early 70s originally, and she originally had a costume that looked very similar to Captain Marvel.
Right, except with a skirt. It was like Captain Marvel with a skirt, because she was a girl, so she had to have a skirt.
Exactly. And then was it the Perez or was it during the Byrne run? It was definitely David Michelini, I think, run of Avengers. And I could be wrong, but it's that period of time where I was introduced to her as Miss Marvel, wearing the black costume with the lightning bolt on front.
Yes, I think that is correct. And it was very similar to the costume we're looking at here, but I think there were a few differences.
Right, and then Busiek relaunched her as Warbird.
Right,
and then she took over the leadership of the Avengers in Mighty Avengers. Was it Frank Cho's?
Right, I didn't read that run, but I believe that's correct.
I've read some of it. It's okay.
It was after Civil War and the death of Captain America, right?
Right. And then at that point, she had. She had long black sleeves, I think, during that period of time. And she still has long black sleeves. Okay. I'm trying to think about the Busiek era. That was George Perez again. Oh, now I'm going to go back and look it up.
After we're done here, before I post this episode on the Fwoosh, I'll put together, with my crude Photoshop skills, a Carol Danvers costume retrospective. Try and find every every subtle iteration.
That would be great. No, but it's also it's a great sign of the longevity of the character. I know that women in comics, swimsuit, sexual objectification, blah blah blah. But this is a character that's been around since the mid early 70s.
Yeah,
and she's still a strong female character in the comics, even though she's now Captain Marvel. Mm-hmm. It's fantastic.
And I mean. All comics as an industry and all the various publishers, especially Marvel and DC being the biggest, individually have they get a lot of grief for portrayals of women and dealing with women's issues and storylines and stuff, and deservedly so. I mean, you see some of the stuff that that you can file under the rubric "women in refrigerators." Which was Gail Simone's blog that sort of launched her onto the comic scene, but also when you go back into the 60s and 70s, a lot of stuff that they were doing that is cringeworthy today. You had like the best of intentions. I know I'm a guy sitting here talking about this, but like you look at some of the 70s stuff that like Roy Thomas and some of those contemporaries were writing, trying to deal with like women's lib issues and stuff, and it's kind of ham-fisted, and it makes you cringe with some of the covers. I remember like an Avengers or Defenders cover where it's like Valkyrie, Scarlet Witch, maybe Ms. Marvel, like whoever were the female heroes of note at the moment, and it's a cover with them, with their arms raised, and all the male heroes like unconscious, and they're like, finally the women killed everybody, or women take over, or something, and it's sort of like their heart's in the right place, but anyway, so it's, I think it's a little bit, you can't, it's tough to judge, stuff from 30, 40 years ago. Certainly today we can hold them to a higher standard, and in a lot of ways, a lot of publishers are meeting that standard. Marvel, I'm sure there's always going to be issues people can bring up, but they're doing a lot of great things. In particular with this character, also with the new Ms. Marvel. I don't know if you had a chance to read that series yet, but it's really great.
I've been catching up. It's finally on my Digital Comics Unlimited subscription. So I've been reading the new Ms. Marvel. I'm enjoying the new Captain Marvel, of course, and I really, really like Black Widow right now. I think that's some good writing. Yeah. And Hawkeye. I don't know if you've been reading Hawkeye, but it's not just about Clint Barton, but it's also about the what's her name? The girl that takes over the mantle as well
from Young Avengers. Yeah.
And there's been some really, really good writing in that comic.
I read the first trade, the trade of the first, I think, maybe 5 or 10 issues, however much that collects in one trade. I really love the artist. Yeah. God, people are going to kill me again on this, but I don't know offhand the artist's name, which is awful. I think he's won the Eisner for it. David Aja. So he's a Spanish artist. And really exploring the form and the medium of comics and using it in the fullest way, which I, as a reader, really appreciate. The one thing I would say, it is a very, at least in the first issues that I read, it is a slow moving, what do they call that? They like to call it expanded narrative or something like that. You don't get a lot in each issue.
No, you don't. It's not high action. It's there's story development. There's a lot of character development. What I like about the character development is it's looking at these two characters, actually throw in some Spider-Woman and Black Widow every once in a while, and it's just kind of who are these characters in the modern world, and I really like that aspect. They're not just superheroes. Where does Clint Barton go when he takes off the mask?
Yeah,
it's cool.
Yeah.
Which is why it makes it sweet that we're getting a Marvel Legend of him in the not-so-distant future.
Yes. Oh, God, please. And, that's something that Hasbro's taken a licking for in the last year and a half or so. They announced a whole wave of figures, including, swapped-out variants of Marvel Legends figures. Some of those included a Hawkeye, which we did get the one version of, but we didn't end up getting the more iconic costume.
Right.
And there was a whole raft of others. They did end up not selling through to retail. It was a couple of different things. I think on some of the ones, like the Hawkeye, for example, was originally slotted as a swap out variant, and then that wave didn't end up selling enough to get to the changed out swap, and,
right.
and then there was a whole wave itself that didn't sell through to retailers, and so got sort of shelved.
Yeah.
And so people were lit the torches and grabbed the pitchforks, and Hasbro's been saying since it happened, they've been saying, look, these we're so far into development, we can almost guarantee you we're going to put them out in some way because we've made the investment in them. We're more eager to get them out than you are because we've got money, we've got skin in the game, and that it's one of those things that's sort of unfortunate where toy companies make a lot of boneheaded decisions just like any companies do, but there are things that are not their fault, and one of those is very often like distribution or products coming to market where it's like if no retailers pick it up or not enough, what are they supposed to do? They have to sell
get screwed.
Yeah. So they've this marks sort of the first occasion where one of those coveted figures, Radioactive Man in particular, is actually now coming out to market. So Hasbro is making good on their word, and I'm pretty eager for Mr. Radioactive Man as well. He was, when I first got back into figure collecting and customizing all about the same time, sort of when Marvel Legends was really hitting its stride. That was one of my first customs when I was getting back into it was Radioactive Man. So seeing as how that custom doesn't really stand up today, I'm particularly interested in that figure. But why don't you tell us a little bit more about? I mean, I read, saw the pictures that you put online and read the bit of context that you had there, and other people might have too. But what are your thoughts? What are you loving about this? What do you wish was better?
All the figures are great. Cap was a little Cap out of the box I was not happy with him. I'll get to that in a sec. Going back to Miss Marvel real fast, she's obviously a repeat of the Moonstone figure that was released with the San Diego Comic Convention 2013 Thunderbolts box set. So those people that have purchased her through either Hasbro Toy Shop or were at the con or eBay, they have experience with the base figure. And really, outside of the sash, there's no difference. The red sash, which in my pictures is on backwards, but that's because I wanted to show off the sash. I know it should be on the tail of it should be on the butt side, but it's a good, solid female figure. It actually looks like a female, and my son and I are going to take pictures of her tonight for an article tomorrow against Moonstone and also against the original Warbird figure that came in the Giant Man series, I believe. Mm-hmm. And this is a just total improvement. The only thing that I would put a complaint about is the lack of a hinge joint in the neck. She's got a standard ball on the head, which is great, but then she's missing that hinge joint that moves forward and backwards.
Right.
And that's the only complaint I have about the figure. Otherwise, I really like it. My wife was a little bit, her hips are kind of big and weird looking, and yeah, we've all covered that already with Moonstone, but it's a minor thing.
Right. Well, it is interesting about female bodies because it's really it's a tough line to walk as a I'm sure as a sculptor or designer, because you on the one end, you can end up with the standard female from the DC Universe Classics, where they're so skinny, their legs and waist and arms are so thin that you look at it, especially I imagine as a female. I mean, certainly my wife says, "What is going on with this? Why is this some like man's interpretation of like how a woman should be, super skinny or what, is."
Yeah.
So then, you have a figure like this Ms. Marvel, or the Moonstone base body, which in a lot of ways is more realistic. It's got some hips, it's got some curves, but maybe it's a little too far the other direction. But it's an interesting problem, I'm sure, to try and cut articulation into the female form versus a man's sort of squared off, trunky body.
Yeah, and it is. That's why I always like to pass things past my wife, because she has a different view. And like right off the bat, why is it that these female figures all have big crotches? now that I've seen it, I can't unsee it.
Right.
And then, then my son kind of throws in a little anecdote about how in class they're 13 years old and girls are starting to discover their bodies, and he throws in this little anecdote about what wide crotches versus narrow crotches mean, and it was just like, sometimes these discussions turn into strange Twilight Zone episodes. But the end result of it was we all agreed that the crotch was too wide. So
yeah.
But that's Miss Marvel, and then Radioactive Man, Chen Lu. This is what, a character from the '60s? Is that right?
Oh yeah. I mean, he was honestly the original Masters of Evil, which was pretty much, after the Loki origin story, was pretty much the Avengers core,
He and Melter, right? Was it Melter? They're pretty much core all the way through.
Yeah, and the Black Knight, the original, villainous Black Knight, that was Baron Zemo's Masters of Evil. That was their main antagonist, and that was 1963, 64. So he's been around. He goes all the way back to there. Originally, actually, I think he appeared before that in Tales to Astonish versus Thor.
That's right. He's a Thor baddie.
Yeah, back in the '60s, the only thing that could match up to someone with the strength of Thor was nuclear power. So that was always the go-to. If you really needed to up the ante, just have someone have nuclear power. So yeah, that's Chen Lu, and then of course, giving it to a Chinese fellow, maybe not the most politically correct thing Stanley ever did, but
Marvel wasn't necessarily politically correct at that time. They were doing some strange things. No, but the figure we've all seen. Again, this is another rehash of a figure we've all seen. This is Hyperion.
Mm-hmm.
For those that have Hyperion, this is Sabretooth. For those that have Sabretooth, this is Luke Cage. And this is a straight out of the box standard sculpt that Hasbro is using. The lovely, lovely, lovely thing about it is it's in Jolly Rancher green. And I love Jolly Rancher action figures. I think they're just fantastic. And for those of you that don't know what a Jolly Rancher is, it's clear candy that you could buy when we were kids. I don't know if you could still get Jolly Ranchers these days.
I think they still have them, but they're in a different. They used to be little small individual candies. I think now they're in like a bar form, or maybe they're gum. They might have Jolly Rancher gum or something like that. I don't know. I don't know what the kids are eating these days. But
this is just, those were just solid clear, crystals of sugar. And,
I'm a sucker for anything that they can add to a figure, not just to shoehorn something in for no reason, but we collect these lines. In particular, myself. Most of what I get is Marvel and DC figures, and what that means in most recent years is DC Universe Classics and Marvel Legends. And so you're dealing with a library of bodies that there's a lot of reuse, and anything that can be done to make a particular figure sort of unique. whether it's a vac metallized part or special kind of paint or something. And certainly this clear sort of plastic fits in there. And again, not just for no reason. There was a lot of DC Direct figures where they would do a variant of a figure that was just in clear plastic for no reason. It would be like the Flash, just clear. But something like this where the character is always presented as glowing with his radioactivity. At least in the pictures I've seen so far, the effect really comes through. So
it pops. Pops. Putting him with Zemo and Moonstone and Claw, he pops on the shelf. It looks great. Having him fight against the other Avengers, he pops. He stands out, and that's exactly what you want from, especially from an expensive 3-pack like this. But for a character like this, as you mentioned, this is what you want. You want him to pop on your shelf and really stand out, and he does. So I love it. I think it's great.
If I wanted to get real picky, I like that old school depiction of him as being a little on the chubby side.
Yeah.
He was kind of a doughy scientist who, endowed himself with these powers, and he didn't bother, going to the gym because he figured, I'm nuclear. I don't need to get in shape. He's sort of like a cosplayer, So putting him on the Hyperion body is great because it does give him that heft, that bulk. And it, that body doesn't have a super narrow waist, so that's great. But if I had one wish for him, I wish he had a little bit of a pop belly. But that's, I know that might be a little too much to ask. I guess the other thing about him is he wears a tunic that sort of comes down into like an apron skirt type piece, which it looks like is a deco piece on this figure.
Right.
But the top, the tank top A-line top portion is just painted on.
It's just painted.
And does that bother you at all? That it's because I don't mind normally painted costume details on figures, except when it really is demarking the costume, where the costume ends and where like the skin or the natural skin of the character would begin, that kind of thing. I don't know.
Yeah, and in that regard, if you look at the paint, and that's what you're talking about, it's just a cheap repaint. They didn't put a lot into that part. They painted the tunic on. And while you were mentioning that, the first thing that came out of my when I opened him up out of the box, I thought, great, Hyperion. We all knew it was going to be on the Hyperion body, but I thought, this would be really good on one of those wrestling figures, like was it King Kong Bundy or whatever that Mattel's putting out.
Well, it was a wrestling figure that I used for my custom back in the day. I can't remember which wrestler, but someone that had one of those wrestling onesies. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. For me, I've gotten to the point in my collecting where I remember when I first started the site, and I was just, I was anal about the fact that a character like this, he didn't look exactly right. Mm-hmm. And over time, I've just gotten to the point where give me some good standard base bucks, and just make the freaking character. I don't care if it looks perfect or if it's comic accurate or what.
Right.
Just make the freaking character. So right now, I'm more happy just to have Radioactive Man on my shelf than I am about nitpicking. And I saw the thread on the Fwoosh. My God, they're already tearing apart his head. Oh, it's just the cage head. It's just slightly modified. I don't care. To be honest, if I really wanted to get nitpicky, I'd say, okay, well, this looks nothing like a Chinese guy.
Right.
And it's like, okay, that's where I'm just, at my collecting point, I'm kind of like, stop. Is this Radioactive Man? Yeah. Could he have been better? Absolutely.
Sure.
But we finally got Radioactive Man after 12 years?
Yeah, or if you want to say, 40 years. Yeah. And that's an interesting thing, which maybe we'll touch on a little bit when we get to the Figma Iron Man, because then we're talking about a sort of higher caliber of toy and a higher price point that goes with that.
Yes.
But, we are talking about a mass retail figure that they're trying to keep the price to, $20, give or take. So there's only so much you can do.
Right.
You can't go to McDonald's and order, grass-fed, local grown filet mignon with a 72 Merlot for on their $5 menu.
No.
Because it can't be done for that price. So it's an interesting thing. I'll save that for when we get to the Figma Iron Man, because I have a whole
slew of questions
and thoughts about this. But I also want to hear what you have to say about this cap. This Captain America, because it's people are saying, it's a straight repaint of the Hit Monkey series Ultimate Cap, but it's not 100%, because he does have the new legs. They've made new upper legs for this body, right?
Yeah, this looks like he's got the Drax legs.
Oh, okay.
So this is I believe this is Drax. Thighs, and then it's the Ultimate Cap gloves and boots,
right?
And then Face-Off Punisher,
right? Which most people know from the Shield Agent or a lot of other uses. Yeah.
Regarding all right, the figure is a good solid figure. Mm-hmm. It's a good solid piece of toy, but it's I'm going to say it's dated, and it's showing signs of dating. And the reason I say that is the new hips that Hasbro's doing these days, where it's a barbell to the barbell in the crotch, and then the hips attached to that. Mm-hmm. That really makes this figure, which has the 45-degree pins and actual ball joints and thigh swivels, it makes it look and feel dated.
Yeah.
And then on top of that chest, it's not a horrible chest, but it's also got a dated look as well. I mean, when that Face-Off Punisher came out, I was all about that Face-Off Punisher. We finally have the new buck that Captain America-sized buck that we've been asking for. Mm-hmm. I never really was on board 100% with that chest and the ab joint, but it was a good solid figure, and this is a good solid toy as well. But it's just the sculpting on it. It looks 7 years old.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if there is a character that sculpt in terms of size and stuff fits for its Cap. I mean, it is, strictly speaking, it is that in-between body that people are talking about, where in between what we call the Bucky Cap, that sort of standard Hasbro body that they've been using, and the Hyperion. This does fall in between in both height and girth, and but like you say, it is a little bit dated in terms of the design, especially the engineering.
But that said, I've been looking at this figure a lot on the vanilla pose on the table, and I like it. So I'll get grief for writing about how I'm tired of the dated chest, and then liking it at the same time. But I have a love-hate relationship, and I'm allowed to have that.
Well,
I think the head is a bit on the large size, and it could be just a smidge reduced in size. Right.
Well, and that's what it also has. This figure comes with swappable heads, and the unmasked head is repurposed from the Commander Rogers figure from the first wave of the return of Marvel Legends.
That's right. Terex wave, right?
And when that came out, people were saying the same thing. Oh, the head's too big. I'm of the mind, without having seen this new figure or even the previous Ultimate Cap figure, I don't have that one either. But when the Commander Rogers figure came out, I was of the mind that head, well, it might have been maybe a tiny bit oversized. I was thinking it was actually closer to a correct size than a lot of the previous figures and characters we've been. Like, I think people are so used to the heads being too small that they've actually, people have come to accept what is actually too small of a head as sort of the standard size head. So when you do get closer to what the head size should be, it seems out of whack. But that's just my perspective.
You're not far off in that. And what I try to do these days is I use the Black Panther base figures, so Hawkeye, Black Panther, Cyclops, that whole sculpt, because I think they've really nailed the proportion between head and body.
Yeah.
And so when I look at this, and even now Captain America, because I love now Captain America, I think it's like the greatest Cap figure ever made. And that's outside of Marvel Legends 1, Toy Biz Marvel Legends 1. But the head size fits a little too big with this 3-pack Cap, with the Steve Rogers head, compared to those. So that's where I'm looking at it and I'm saying, we're talking a couple of percentages down. But if they did that, it would be perfect.
Right. And I'm kind of surprised that one of these brilliant people who does casting hasn't done that, because I know there's been other heads, like for example the Build-A-Figure Puck head. There's a couple of people that did casts where they expanded it up like by 3% or something like that,
right?
And it turns out to be great. I'm surprised no one's done that with the unmasked Cap head or some of these other ones. Just bring it down a tiny bit.
Maybe I'll have to make an order for one of those.
Yeah, do it.
That gives me an idea.
I also, in the back of my mind, going back when it's been like more than 2 years now, probably, since that Commander Rogers figure came out. But one of the immediate things that came to my mind, not only the size of it, but also the look of it, because he's a very square-jawed, grizzled, guy. I thought this would be a great Bruce Wayne head for a DC Universe Classic, because DC Universe Classics are slightly larger. They're 6-inch figure, but the scale, the proportions are a little bit heightened, and they've always had, or a lot of times have had, maybe a too small head, and I always wondered, what that head would look like, for an unmasked DC Universe Classics Batman.
I don't know. That'd be interesting. But DC Universe Classics, they also have small necks, so you'd have kind of a weird look there.
Yeah, well, it would be you'd have to do a whole
mod on that.
Yeah, you'd have to mod the neck and the whole bit. It would be a whole thing. I'll save that for my Batman custom figure project that's been brewing in my mind for a decade.
Actually, that'd be a good topic for DC action figures. We need to start hitting DC action figures soon. So I'm talking.
Yeah,
about
well, have you been picking up any of the DC collectibles stuff that's been coming out in the last year?
No, I haven't, and a lot of that is. Well, if we're done talking about the Target 3-pack, then we could talk about the next subject and why I'm limited in my collecting.
Let's do it. Let's get on to the Figma Iron Man, because it is interesting. I read your write-up and your picks, and you are loving this figure, it seems like. But we are talking about a $100 figure now.
We are talking about a $100 action figure.
So that means a lot of different things when you talk about, because even though you paid $100 for the 3-pack, you were paying a premium to get a U.S. retail exclusive. But this is the Figma Iron Man is legit, basically a $100 figure, and this is something that in some ways Hasbro is with their Star Wars Black and even the Legends to a certain extent in the last year. They've sort of answered this, put an answer to this topic that I was bringing up previous to that. In terms of the 6-inch action figure at mass retail, and this originally I was talking about this, a year or so ago in regard to the failure of DC Universe Classics, or maybe not failure, but end of whatever you want to call it, the end of that line. Because a lot of people were blaming Mattel for the figures just not being good enough, not coming in with enough accessories, the sculpts not being new, and all this kind of stuff that all involves money, essentially. And to my mind, my thought was, I don't know if a large company like a Hasbro or Mattel can make mass retail 6-inch action figure that meets the standard of most collectors today, because we've come to expect so much because the product has gotten so much better over the last 10 years, just continues to one-up itself for so many years, that what we've come to expect now, I don't know if they can make that for $20 at mass retail anymore. I think
I don't think they ever could, to be honest. I mean, if I take this Iron Man figure and I'm looking at it, and I remember when the press images first came out, and everybody was just, wow, the best Iron Man ever, blah blah blah. But a lot of the comments were, finally, we're getting a 6-inch Hot Toys quality figure. Right. And I think Hot Toys, in many ways, not to talk a lot about them, but they've set a new standard in the collector market. Mm-hmm. And you're seeing everybody starting to try to copy that standard, that quality, mm-hmm. and very few have done it. Mm-hmm. But on the same note, I don't know how many pieces Hot Toys making, and I don't know how many units were made of Iron Man here, of the Figma right. Iron Man. Right. But if you look at a standard Marvel, and back in the day, Jesse, if I remember correctly, when I was talking to him about San Diego, he said we usually run about 50,000 units per figure mm-hmm. in a wave. So if you have a six-figure wave of Marvel Legends, that's 50,000 units per character.
Right.
If I remember correctly.
That sounds about right, with what I heard.
And that's a lot of plastic.
Yeah.
This Figma Iron Man, you may be talking maybe 10,000 max. I don't know how many orders Figma got for this. Mm-hmm. But you're talking about smaller runs, and even Hot Toys, I doubt they're producing 50,000 pieces, 50,000 right. units, mm-hmm. And at that, you just can't. I can't imagine Hot Toys trying to sell their stuff at 50,000 units. That would be insane.
Right.
Break the bank.
Right, and so, I mean, there is the economies of scale. The more units you make, the cheaper it becomes to make each one, and right. so that accounts for some of the expense. But the bottom line is that a figure like this, like just taking this Figma Iron Man, in terms of all of the plus ups, the sculpt, all the accessories, the engineering, the higher end figure like this, it is not going to sell 50,000 units at mass market, because it's going to cost more. It's hard enough to sell a $20, radioactive man, or just take a regular Marvel Legends Iron Man that costs $20. It's hard enough to sell one of those. So, a $40 or $45, whatever it would end up being, if Figma was able to put these out in the same kind of retail scale. It's not gonna. It's just not. It's just a non-starter.
Oh no, it's not going to happen. And I took a picture of him next to Bleeding Edge Iron Man, and you can just, you can see the difference in quality.
Right.
It's just a completely it's just a complete different level of quality.
Right. But yeah, so my point being, it's just it's unfair to hold Hasbro or Mattel or any of the mass market product to like a Hot Toys or a Figma standard, because it's just a different model.
It's not going to happen.
Different sales. It's a different business model entirely.
Yeah.
That said, Hasbro's gone a long way with the Star Wars Black, and some of the recent Marvel Legends have been really great. So they have rekindled my hope that there is a market for that in between, for that $20 figure, or what can be done for $20. But you're never going to get a figure like the Figma Iron Man in Marvel Legends.
No, you're not. And I mean, God, the paint alone on it, that metallic paint, whatever they're using, it's just beautiful.
Yeah.
My son was playing with it the other day, and he popped off a knee pad, and he goes, "Oh, these pop off," and I'm like, "Ah, $100 figures, stop!"
So I take it the knee pads aren't meant to pop off.
No, they're not. I mean, they do in the event that you overstress them, but it's like,
right.
God, come on, guys.
So yeah, tell us more about this Figma Iron Man. One of the things I'll just say before I let you wax poetic, I know one of the things, obviously people, Figma and other companies like Figma, import companies and stuff that have wandered into the Marvel and DC superhero licenses with a 6-inch figure. A lot of people get their heads turned because of the quality, but then they see that, you know, the Marvel Legends and DC Universe Classics and some other superhero lines, they may be 6-inch lines, but they're not necessarily true 1/12 scale, if that makes any sense. You know, they're sort of heroic proportions, if you will. So, but the stuff like this, like Figma, tends to be a true 1/12. Therefore, the scale doesn't always mesh with Marvel Legends, and sometimes you have a Iron Man that people at first blush might say, "Oh, that looks great," but he's going to be too small to use with my Legends. But that is not the case with this Iron Man.
Not the case. And then that's right. You have. I'll take the 3 companies making 6-inch Marvel characters. I know there's a couple of others, but you have SH Figure Arts, who's Bandai's line of 5. They're roughly 5.5 to 6-inch action figures, leaning more towards the 5.5-inch. And then you have Figma now, who's doing Marvel characters. And Figma, they're not perfect on their scale, but they tend to be more of a truer 6-inch action figure, and that's that 1/12 scale. Mm-hmm. And then you have Marvel. And Marvel does, as you mentioned, the heroic proportions. Most of their figures are roughly around 6.5, not 6.5, but 6. That's not quick. 6.2 inches. What is that? 6 1/8 or something like that. They're a little. That 6-inch, that 6-foot human doesn't translate into a 6-inch action figure. It translates into something a little bit more like a 6'1", 6'2" human.
Right.
So this is a little truer to scale, and it's been part of the problem with the Figma line of the Avengers action figures, because the scaling's kind of been messed up in people's heads. They've been following true scale. Thor is a 6', 2-inch, whatever action figure. You know, he's 6 inches, 6 inches, 2 centimeters, whatever, and he's roughly a 6'2" action figure.
Right.
Cap, on the other hand, was significantly smaller than what you expect from Chris Evans, who is 6 foot. It was more like a 5'10", maybe a 5'9" action figure. And so, but the perception of Thor is he's supposed to be huge, and he is huge in the movie. But that's also because most of the other actors are tiny.
Right. Robert Downey Jr. is like 5'9" or 8 or something like that.
Yeah, and so you have to kind of put all that into perspective. Mm-hmm. Iron Man, though, this figure, I don't know what the actual movie, the suit, how big that is, but this is perfect. This is roughly about 6.5 inches tall.
Right.
And that's what everybody wanted for their Marvel Legends collections, for their 6-inch action figure collections. They wanted those characters to fit.
You want Iron Man to be a little bit taller than Captain America and a little bit shorter than Thor.
Yeah, in this case, he's taller than Thor and
taller
than
he's taller than the Figma Thor, but not the Marvel Legends Thor.
Not the Marvel Legends Thor. That's correct. Right. So you kind of have a weird Figma set, but this figure fits perfectly. I don't know how else to say it. Fits perfectly into a Marvel Legends line. I have him next to now Cap, and he's just. It's perfect. It's awesome.
Right. Wow. Yeah, it looks pretty great in the pictures online as well. And it comes with, what does he come with? 4, 6 hands? Something?
I think he comes with 8 hands in all. He's got two hands that shoot repulsor, that you can add repulsor blasts onto. And the hands are, I think one's flying and one's shooting. Mm-hmm. And then he's got 2 boot repulsors that you can add on. And then he's got gripping hand, the standard kind of hole in the middle gripping hand, fist, and then I think just some regular open hands.
Wow.
Yeah, so and then you get a flight stand.
Oh, flight stand comes with it as well. I was going to ask what flight stand he would work with, but he comes with his own.
Yeah, Figma releases, just like SH Figure Arts, they all release, for the most part, they release a figure stand with it. The only problem with it is you can't get him into horizontal flying poses because his ball joints aren't stiff enough to hold the weight, and so his legs flop down. So I guess if you're doing drunk Tony flying, then it looks great. But
Or you could have them flying straight up.
you could have them flying straight up, in the kind of up and down.
Right. And how are the interchangeable hands and stuff? Is that a delicate maneuver, or is that pretty swapping those out? Does it give you a little bit of agita every time you do it, or?
It's not delicate, but it always requires a little bit of leg muscle.
Okay.
Elbow grease. Mm-hmm. I actually had to take out a pair of needle nose pliers because the ball joint was really stuck in to the wrist, and so we eased it out. Now it can pop in and out, but that first time around, you're like, please
My $100 toy
that I can't replace because it's sold out.
Oh well, that was my next question. I guess this is something I'll never own then. If it's just sold out.
Well, you can still order it on Big Bad Toy Store. I don't know if Entertainment Earth has it available. Right. It's one of those things, though, that you're going to get it on the aftermarket through eBay. I don't know about Amazon if they're selling this at all. I know that there's a Good Smile company. They're an online retailer in Japan, and they do global sales. They have a special version of this with an unmasked or the mask up Tony Stark.
Oh,
yeah, and it's also got add-on parts where the missiles on the thighs open up and the flaps on the back open up, and that one costs a little more, but it was a Japan exclusive, so you had to go through companies like Mandrake in order to get it.
Oh man.
But yeah, you're not going to get this anytime soon, and unless your hobby shop local hobby shop managed to order a couple. Right. But you can still order at Big Bad Toy Store, so
Maybe I'll give myself an early Christmas present with this.
Yeah,
it certainly looks pretty great. Although talking about that Japanese exclusive one.
Yeah, I was having a real hard time with that, and I almost went with the Tony Stark face because I thought, you got to have Tony Stark's face, Robert Downey Jr. Come on. And then I thought, you know what? This guy's going into my Marvel Legends collection if he scales right, if he scales out okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the face wasn't important.
Right. Oh, all right.
But I love it. I mean, it's just my kids. They pick it up, they play with it. If you don't like the Figma joints, the elbow joints and the knee joints, you're going to get turned off. But for the most part, I don't mind them. They're well hidden in the sculpt. The only problem I have with this figure, really, really big problem, is the wrist, the hand guards on the wrists. They're just these floppy pieces of plastic that look like an afterthought.
Oh, that's too bad.
It is really too bad. Kind of irks me a little bit. Spend $100 on a figure and I got floppy pieces of plastic.
Well, see, then I figure at that price point, you legitimately get to make complaints like that.
Yeah. I love the figure. It's great. It's expensive, as we've talked about. It's not for, it's not for your average collector, and by average, I mean the guy that's even having a hard time justifying paying $20 for an action figure.
Right.
Because $90 is it's an investment.
Yeah, and especially if you're buying that in the U.S., the shipping is going to be pretty substantial as well. So
I pay $20 in shipping, and then on top of that, Post Denmark, the postal company, they're going to charge me. The post office is going to charge me $20 to $30 for import fees, and then just for them to charge me $20 to $30, they're going to charge me $20 to $30.
There's a fee assessed for assessing fees.
Yeah. So going back to a point about how we kind of got on track about the cost and why I don't buy DC collectibles and why I don't buy a lot of lines is it's just too expensive.
Right. Well, that's legit. I mean, it's tough even for us, domestically.
Oh, it is. And going back to the start of the Fwoosh, I mean, before the Fwoosh, we were on toymania.com on the forums there, and Marvel Legends was getting announced, and those were what, $5 99 cents when they came out.
Gosh, I don't even remember.
2001,
I mean,
2002.
I definitely picked up, Captain America from the first wave and Magneto and Toad from the second wave. I don't remember what I paid for them, but I do remember when I started really kind of going all in, which was, I think, the Galactus series, which was wave 8, I think. So, yeah, it was a little while before, but around then I think they were about $8.99. So if that was wave 8 that they were $8.99, and wave 1 was probably, like you said, about $5-6.
Hold on, I can tell you. Giant Man actually was 2006, and that came out between Series 12 and Series 13. So, yeah, that was a long... Let's see, that was Giant Man. Galactus was Series 9. Sentinel was Series 10. God, it's a trip down memory lane.
Yeah. Well, I know that the Galactus series was around 2005 because...
2005. Yeah, that's correct.
Because that really coincides with when I found the Fwoosh. That was when I really sort of went all in and... was looking for information somewhere on the internet, or maybe I was killing time at a job or something. Search term Marvel Legends. That's when I found the Fwoosh, which maybe that's a really good segue for talking about the Fwoosh history. It's more than 12 years old now, and it's kind of remarkable when I think for myself that it's a place, a website, a forum, a hub, a community, whatever you want to call it, that I've been involved in some capacity or other for almost 10 years. That's a long stretch of time. That's like, I don't know what other things are 10 years long that you can compare it to, but that is a not insubstantial piece of time. And I wasn't even one of the first people on there. I mean, you guys had been rolling for a few years before I found you. So, but since I have you sort of a captive interview subject here, I would love to just maybe some people have maybe heard you talk about this stuff before, and if so, sorry. But selfishly, I have some questions I want to ask. Hopefully, they won't be so banal that nobody else will be interested. But I myself want to hear about this stuff, and so too bad. Everybody else is going to have to hear it too. but okay, and I have seen some stuff you've written on occasion over the years about the forming of the creation of the Fwoosh. But let's just roll back to 2002, right? And so George Bush is president. We're gearing up to.
Let's go back a little further.
Okay, sure.
2002 is just when I registered the site.
Oh, okay.
I moved to Denmark in 1998.
Okay.
So, and this is kind of the important aspect.
Yeah.
When I moved to Denmark in '98, I moved from Dallas, Texas. Okay. And at that time, I had kind of a toy comic community group of guys, hobbyists, that we all hung out every once in a while. Mm-hmm. And when I moved away to Denmark, I lost that.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's something, people always talk about, well, when you move away, what's that like? I lost that. I lost kind of that whole grasp of what was my hobby. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it was a short time after that I found toymania.com and the buzz over there. And for those of you that remember, it was a great online forum. For those of you that don't remember, it was this bulletin board forum that tons of us would meet and talk about our toys. And I think they'd been around since like 95 or before.
Jeez.
So it had been going on. And customizers, and I was a customizer at that point, and long before, would post pictures there. And so part of my whole moving away was trying to find out how do I stay in touch with this hobby that I love, because nobody in Denmark really collects toys like mm-hmm. I did or we do. It just doesn't have the same. It's so bloody expensive. Sure. So at some point with customs, I realized that I was using free services to post pictures. and I needed someplace that could meet the capacity of my needs. And it was also around that time that a couple of us started splitting off and talking about Marvel Legends on a... God, what was the name? I need Robo here. I need Brian here. He can tell me what the name of the free forum that we were using. But we were also reaching capacity over there with what we could do. And so I just decided, you know what, I'm going to go out and buy some server space and start a website. GeoCities, I think I had reached the 10 gigabyte limit or whatever it was.
Oh, GeoCities.
Oh, yeah. And also I reached the limit of what I could do with GeoCities, and I had to go into a paid account. So I just figured, okay, what's out there? And that's how I started Fwoosh. At that time, Fwooshnet.com.
Right.
And we put the forum on there. Voy forums, that's what it was called. Voy, V-O-Y, Voy forums. Oh, yeah. We had the Plan B forum, and good times. And so I started Fwoosh, and we put the forum on there, used a PHP BB forum, and really didn't have much of a front page. We didn't know what we were going to do with the front page. But the forum was important, and kind of split off from Toy Mania and took a bunch of Toy Maniacs with us. Cool. And that was in 2002. Was it April, I think, I first registered it. And then we started the forum. We moved the forum over, I think, in October that year. And we used a PHP BB forum, and that's been the format ever since.
And the history of the term Fwoosh, if I remember correctly, and I think you've posted the original little Microsoft Paint drawing that you made. But I'll let you go. Go ahead and tell the genesis of the word itself, the name itself.
I think PS2 had just come out at that point, and Xbox had come out at that point, maybe, or was it Dreamcast? And two of my friends were going on and on. We when you're at work, obviously, you email your buddies,
right? Or
sometimes you message them. And we were having this big long conversation about what was the best gaming system. And my two friends, they're gamers. I mean, they're deep into it,
right.
Nerd level deep, on a scientific level deep. And at one point, they're just going on and on about which system is the best. And the first thing that came into my mind was, it's turned into a flame war. And so I wrote in this email, Fwoosh, in big colors and bold and whatnot. And they just started busting out laughing. And one of my friends, he wrote back and said, I feel like standing on my desk and raising my arm in the air right now in the middle of the office and going, Fwoosh. And that's really how it started. I mean, that's where the name came from. And
cool.
That whole microcosm was kind of a macrocosm for how ToyMania.com, Flame Wars, and Internet in general, Flame Wars would start.
Right.
And then combine the fact that the sound of flame in comics tends to be Fwoosh.
Right.
It was just a no-brainer.
Very cool. Very cool.
And as you've seen over the decade, flame wars on the Fwoosh are common.
They certainly do. We've, in that regard, the various names of the forums have gotten changed over the years. Every once in a while, the Marvel forum, the DC forum, et cetera, et cetera. But their current names, I think this might be the longest they've retained the name, any given name, and it's just because they seem so appropriate with all the various prisons.
They are, and that's true. It's somebody actually mentioned that to me, that we needed to change the names, and we always make fun of the kind of the brown lantern, the lazy ass way that we approach things with the forums. I don't think it's really lazy. I just think we can't think of anything better or more appropriate.
Yeah,
right?
It kind of is the best. They're really the best names. But speaking of how things have changed and over the years, I mean, you've not only kept the site going, but kept it growing and changing and thriving for more than a decade. And there's not a lot of things on the internet, or just things, period, that have that sort of longevity. I mean, especially, something that sort of began as a hobby or something you were doing for fun. A lot of people have interests or projects like that, and they serve a turn, and after a certain amount of time, or many, several years, their lives take a turn, they become involved in something else, they get bored with it, they get frustrated with it, they just don't feel like doing it anymore. A million things happen that it fades away, they stop doing it, they give it up, they give it away, whatever the case may be. But that has not only not been the case with the Fwoosh, but it's always, you've continued to push it to grow and to thrive. And I just, I'm wondering, over the course of the years, especially because, you're talking about 1999, 2000, 2001, when the internet's still really a frontier place, and, Web 2.0 is not even really underway. So the Fwoosh is one of the first, places for action figure toy discussion. Over the years, there have been many more that have come about. Was there ever a time, over the years, was there ever a point where you thought, oh, this is so much work, and, I've been doing it for so long, and now there's these other places that I could hang out, and I wouldn't have to worry about running it and stuff. Maybe I'll just let this go or not do it. Did that ever cross your mind? Or
all the time? Up until about 2010, all the time. There are a number of things. One is I commute a lot to work, and my commutes are like 3 hours across the country type thing on a daily basis, and that's stressful in itself. Finding the time, even now I'm taking Sunday evening time away from the family by doing this. It's an investment. And to keep it running and to keep it going, it's an investment. But it's not just an investment on my part; it's an investment on the team and the teams over the years that have put into this. And from a hobby perspective, it was great to say, "Well, I'm just going to keep it as a hobby." But then that has its limitations, and that's where you also have to really. I think it was probably around 2008, 2009, where I really started evaluating and saying, "Do I really want to do this? And keep it as a hobby, or am I going to do something with it?" And it's really tough. It's expensive. Let's say the tough is expensive, because a site like the Fwoosh is growing, and it's constantly been growing, and it's been growing pretty consistently year in and year out. And that means that there's a cost.
Right.
And there's a certain point where that cost, you start saying, is it worth it?
Right.
My biggest factor in not dropping the Fwoosh, and you did mention it, you said that I could go to other online forums. My biggest factor in not dropping the Fwoosh has been my feeling of, if I stop doing this, then I'm letting go of this hobby. And I've invested a lot into this hobby personally, and it's given back to me. And if I were to let go of it, let go of the Fwoosh, I know that I would probably collect toys, but maybe not as much. And that's just something I'm not interested in doing. I don't have another hobby where I go, God, I want to go start cooking.
Right.
Or I want to go start whittling wood.
Right.
This is it. This is what I enjoy. This is what gives me satisfaction. And because of that, I didn't drop it. And trust me, I've been close. I have been close to pushing the Control-Alt-Delete button on the server and just saying, fuck it. There have been... The best case is the 2007 issue, which everybody knows about, where we had leaked pictures during the Toy Biz. And I literally, during that whole episode, was just ready to say, you know what, let's close it up and be done with it. The hack in 2007.
Right. Well, that's what I thought you were going to say when you said 2007 was someone hacker had not just, for people that might not have been around or know about it, it wasn't just a case of the site getting hacked, but someone actually took ownership, somehow was able to take ownership of the domain, right?
Yeah, they were able to hack into, once they hacked into the site, they because I had all the email going through the web server, they just went on and found the passwords to the domain name, to the registrar, and transferred it. And electronically, it was my name.
Right.
And that was one of those times where it's like, well, do I fight it? Do I not fight it? What do I do? Do I close it down? And much to, I think, kind of the dismay of some of the guys at the time was, I said, fuck it. We stay alive.
Right. Turn
it back on. New domain name. Let's get it up. Let's get it running tomorrow. Right. And, you can imagine with the staff kind of going, and we're all volunteers.
Right,
we're not making any money off of it. And they're all going, oh my God, you're crazy. Give it time. Let it be down for a while. And I was like, no, we provide a service.
Right.
We need that service up and running.
And it turned out to be a pretty great decision because, not only in terms of just the continuity and people knowing that the site was still there. I mean, I can't imagine what it would have been like, especially now, or let alone back then. If the site was down for a week or so, I can imagine people just start thinking, "Oh, that site's gone." Trying to get those people back would be a whole. But also, it resulted in the new domain name, which is probably a much cleaner, better name going forward. You might not have ever changed it, but
no, I probably wouldn't have. And I'd still like to, change it to Fwoosh, but I can't seem to.
Right.
I think the Fwoosh works right now, and that's what everybody refers it to. So refers to it as. So, that was a tough time, but that was also one of those that year from 2007 and roughly up until about I want to say about 2010. I still struggled with that decision of do we keep it, do we not, do I let it go, do I not, and I hadn't really gone left or right. It was kind of in the middle. And it wasn't until 2010 where I really started looking at it and say, okay, am I developing this? And not me, I say I, but are we developing this?
Right.
Am I going to get the guys together and say, we're going in this direction, this is what we're going to do, I'm going to make this investment, and we're going forward. And that required a little bit of work because I live in Denmark, but after I decided, screw it, let's go for it. Let's see what this can be. We've been going full throttle since.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing sometimes when I think back to what the site was and what it did and everything about it from years ago and think about it now. It's been such a gradual evolution in so many ways that it's easy to sort of miss the arc, but if I really try to turn my mind back, it's amazing how much it's grown and developed. So I mean, that's plaudits to you and everyone else that's been involved. But
yeah, and it's not me. I've always said I pay for the site. I made sure that the bills were being paid, and to be honest, that's true. It's every single guy who's volunteered and who continues to volunteer. And then it's the people that come to the site that make this happen. I'm not making any magic. I'm not coming up with any fantastic business ideas that can't be found on Google. No, I mean, it's not like I'm revolutionizing anything. And I'm not. I'm just making it operational and making it work. But that requires an incredible group of people behind. It requires guys like Nick who have a camera and an eye for taking pictures, and Matt Kay, and guys like Brian who want to just dig into everything about the site and want to know how it works. And Cannonball. And I know that probably a lot of people don't realize how much Cannonball contributes because he's quiet, but he does the copy editing along with Benty and Matt, and those guys. They said if we're going to do this front page crap, then it's got to be good. Right. It's got to be copy edited. It can't be a bunch of spelling mistakes and crappy sentences. We want good content, and a lot of people, they don't realize how much they put into it, and the mods over the years. And I'm talking over the years since the start. and we go through mods. We rotate every once in a while. They've been great. I mean, some of the fires that they've had to put out on the forum, holy crap.
Well, it's an interesting thing because having been around since, like I said, 2005-ish, I feel like the forums have changed in a way too, and I don't really know what to attribute this to, or it's hard to even really put your finger on, but it just seemed, I remember it seeming a little more like the Wild West back in the day, and a lot of the fires that the mods were putting out would burn a little, or we'd see more of that smoke and flame before they were able to get to it, or and maybe I don't know if it's the time that I spend on the forums or which forums I'm on, or if it's just the way things are moderated, or if it's the type of people who are active on the board, or if it's a mix of all those things. But it does seem to be a lot smoother of an experience in the forums than it was, say in 2005 or 2006. And the other thing, I guess, is sort of ancillary to that is, you mentioned you have gone through a lot of moderators over the years, and as I'm sure, people's interest and availability, ebbs and flows, and it's a natural cycle of going through different people. But the main moderators, active right now seem to have been around for quite some time, and it seems like a while since there's been a real turnover in moderators. So, do you want to speak to any of that in terms of how the forums have evolved, and why you think this group of moderators has been around for so long? And
this group of moderators has been around for a while because they work really well together, and there's no magic behind it. They work really well together. They have pretty much a shared vision and idea of how they want to log on and see posts and what kind of posts they want to see in the morning. And because of that, they have a pretty clear idea of how to run the forum. They also have a very good mandate, I'll call it mandate, in that they don't go through the drama of trying to corral the guys and to get the conversation back on track. I think they have enough experience that they pretty much know, kill it. It's not going anywhere, kill it. And there's not even a point in trying to talk to this guy. It's just not going to happen. And they're really good, I think, about recognizing that and they're talking amongst themselves about how to deal with things. It makes having the Fwoosh an enjoyable experience when you have that. The other thing is, people always say that the Fwoosh has become self-moderating, and that's not false. That's actually true. I'm not sure why, but it's probably just the natural evolution of a forum, in that the guys that have been there forever, they're almost better moderators than some of the moderators that we have. And that's I'm not taking away from our guys, but they've figured out, hey, I want to log on to this place as well, and I don't want to have a bunch of flame war crap.
Right.
So they know how to keep the conversation going, even when it's kind of going in the wrong direction, and they know how to steer it back in the right direction. It doesn't mean that there aren't hiccups.
Sure.
There are. There's a hiccup, at least once a week in the DC forum.
It's always it's funny too. Over the years, it's sometimes it's like, for a long time it was the Marvel forum, and then it became the DC forum. It's always like it shifts. Where the turbulence happens, it goes from one place to the next, and it's sort of like it's like a rotating thing.
Well, but it also follows the product.
Sure.
For DC, for a lot of years, it was DC, and we all laughed about it being DC, but it's not so much DC anymore. And, the question is it going to be more Masters of the Universe Classic, or is it going to go back to Marvel Legends? Because those are the two active and strong products. Marvel, though, for whatever reason, that board, it kind of moderates itself. And you can read it. You go through the threads every once in a while, you're going, oh my God, this is about to be a train wreck. And then all of a sudden it's saved, and you're going, huh. And I'll even go down and see, well, did we delete some posts or something? And it just, somehow it righted itself.
Right. Well, and I guess there's probably something to be said for such a long history of consistently good moderation that people realize what the expectation is, what's going to be tolerated, what's really not respectable or appropriate, and like you say, self-moderate. I imagine.
Yeah. So it's nice. It's good. And I guess in many ways that was kind of all the dream. That was the dream, or that was the hope when we started. Is that somehow it would get to kind of a self-moderating. We're lazy, right? We're brown lanterns. So the more it self-moderates, the better.
Well, another thing about the forums on the Fwoosh, which is interesting, and I guess maybe the answer to this is obvious, and maybe it's not. But we talk about there are other action figure specifically websites and toy sites and forums, and Fwoosh is certainly one of the biggest in terms of traffic and hits and longevity. But even the ones that are sort of on par with the Fwoosh in terms of size, the forums on those sites are nowhere near as active as the Fwoosh in terms of the number of people posting, the frequency of posts, the number of topics. If you hit some, and I don't mean this as a disparagement on other sites, because there are other good sites, and like I said, those sites are on par with Fwoosh in terms of size and traffic and stuff. But specifically, there doesn't seem to be, at least that I've come across, a comparable action figure forum that is as active and populated and has remained so for so long. So, what do you attribute that to? If you agree that's true.
I don't have the data on that, and so I'm not going to know if it's true or not. I think that's a tough one for me to answer. I do a lot of research on how other sites are doing. I don't know how other sites are doing forum wise. I tend to kind of look at the overall numbers and try to see where we're at. And even then, that's very difficult. Trying to use Alexa.com or Quantcast.com or whatever. I don't know why our forum. I think we've just got a good, solid forum base. And we've got a lot of guys that have been there since 2002. And they just continue to come to the hobby. And maybe somehow that reflects that comment that I said about they're not ready to let go. And I don't mean that we should let go, but it's they enjoy the hobby. They don't want to let it go.
Right.
And that makes the Fwoosh, somehow that bleeds into the Fwoosh forums, and that bleeds into that community. They don't want to let it go. They enjoy this, and they enjoy talking about the toys. And we've provided a location that is safe for them to talk about toys. It's not like, I don't know what, maybe somethingawful.com or something, one of the larger and long, or 4chan, one of those old forums where people don't always feel safe there. Reddit, they don't always feel safe there. But at Fwoosh, we've provided a safe environment for people to come in and talk about their hobby.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it works. In regards to other toy sites, well, how many collectors are there?
Right.
And when you've got one forum or one place that really, really works well, then they don't feel that need necessarily to go anyplace else. And we're generic. We're broad. We have a strong Marvel Legends and strong Masters of the Universe Classic and strong DCUC, but we do have kind of a broad spectrum.
Yeah, I was going to amend my remark before and say that you might have a forum like, for example, the He-Man.org. That's a pretty active forum and has been for a long time. If you're interested in talking about Masters of the Universe, but that's all that it is. So, but you think you'd be hard pressed to find a toy forum that covered the breadth of different interests that the Fwoosh does, and all of them active. Even the general toy forum that is kind of the catch-all for sort of everything else, that's even a really active forum with a lot of interesting topics and discussions and stuff going on. So
yeah, no, it's an interesting question, and it's tough. There's probably a lot of factors building into that. I know there's been some sites that have kind of come and gone over the past 10 years. I think we just have we don't necessarily have a good business model, but I think we just have a good, well, not for the forum. The forum's always kind of been, it's there and people can come and talk. But I think, and if that's a business model, if that whole, we want to provide a safe community, then for the most part we have that.
Well, speaking of business model, if you will, but just generally, what are your sort of plans and dreams in the near future, near term for Fwoosh, and what are you thinking of, planning, hoping for in the?
There's a lot of stuff we'd like to do and that we talk about. One of the things that we're really talking about right now is expanding the multi-site, and we've been doing that for years, but a lot of it requires a good strategy and a good business plan. One of the things was in 2013 was to sit down and say, what's our publishing schedule going to be? Can we afford it? Can we do it? And how do we do it? And I sat down came up with a plan and gave it to Nick and said, do you think this will work? And he said, sure, let's try. And we've been doing really good with our front page. And the last 2 years, we've been really focusing on the front page and trying to get it up. We wanted to make a lot of the content that disappears into the forum or gets deleted or lost or whatever, we wanted to make that front and center on the front page. And that was really important for us. And looking ahead, we've been looking at, and just on the publication side of things, we've been looking at, do we expand into Fwoosh Flicks, or do we expand into the coin slot, or do we expand into the short box? And it's tough. Every part of the multi-site really has an advantage to expansion, but it takes a lot of work. And then the other thing is where's the interest? Where are we going to get the best return in that regard? And by that I mean, which volunteers do we have? Which guys do we have writing stuff for us that are willing to put effort and energy into a certain aspect? And we're playing with some ideas, and we have been for a while. But I think kind of where we're landing right now is with Fwoosh Flicks, and that really seems to draw. JKL and Jed are doing some fantastic reviews, and that seems to be an area that we really want to. That seems like a natural area to grow. Comics is tough.
Right.
Film is tough, but film we can at least try to find a niche where we can fit in. Right. Comics, wow, you're talking about Bleeding Cool and CVR and Newsarama and oh god. Right. And then the other thing that we're looking at, which is the podcast, which Screen Man Craig did a great job piecing it together, and we wanted to, and I know this is a long podcast, but we wanted to try to make a shorter podcast, something that would be YouTube friendly, and since that's where the young generation seems to be hitting, and we wanted to try to reach out to the new audience, the younger generation, and bring them in and stay current. And so the podcast was kind of I think we need to go in this direction. And that was the YouTube direction. And I know we're not there yet. We'll get there. But one of the things that happened was during this whole investigation of how do we do YouTube and stuff, Robo said, well, shouldn't we do a video? And it's like, yeah, let's do video reviews. And everybody went, oh, we hate video reviews. They suck. Oh, no one watches these things. And I started doing some research, and I said, guys, people do watch these. And even today, just so you know, I said, oh, I'm doing the podcast today. And Robo said, with video?
So, that would mean I have to comb my hair.
Yeah, well, even my oldest son said, you're doing video, right? And I said, no. He goes, boring. And I'm like,
oh, no.
And I'm like, but you really want to see two guys talking to each other on a split screen or whatever? He's like, oh, hell yeah. And if you could every once in a while just show the toy you're talking about in your hands. And I was like, it's just a whole different world. And since Robo started doing the video and Cannonball been doing videos, those guys are doing a great job. and people are loving it.
I have to say, I mean, I have watched a lot of those, and I don't want to sound too much like a Fwoosh booster, or I'm in the pocket of Big Fwoosh, but but they're great.
No, it's great, and that's one of the things that I mentioned before is when we started really working on the homepage, and we'd been doing it off and on. Nick's been doing a lot of stuff, but when we said we're going to get this publishing schedule in and we're going to really do this, one of his mandates was we've got to have the best pictures on the web. We've got to have the best. Everybody who's going to take pictures and do reviews, they have to do the best pictures of toys on the web. And Robo's and Cannonball have kind of taken that mandate and said, we got to have the best videos on the web. If we're going to do this, we have to be better than everybody else. I don't think we're 100% there yet, but they work their asses off on it. And it's great to see. And I love it. And just... did it freak you out listening to Cannonball the first time?
Well, I had actually met him before a couple of times, so
okay.
so I had that advantage.
I had met Robo, so I knew about his Bob Ross way of talking. So and when I listened to the first video, I was just in stitches. I was just dying laughing because I thought this is fantastic. This is the Bob Ross of the.
But it's kind of great because it's so. I mean, there's a reason why Bob Ross is so popular, right? I mean, it's very what's the word accessible. It's
simple.
Simple. It's it sends focus and attention to the product at hand. It takes it off of the person. It's really cool. Yeah. So I had heard so much about how he had this, Arkansas twang that I was expecting, some kind of. I was like, oh, this guy doesn't have an accent at all, compared to what I was expecting. I was expecting, okay, here's Galactus, or some overblown, stereotype or something. But that's not the case.
He doesn't have that. He doesn't have that twang, but he's got very soft spoken, and he does have kind of a southern drawl.
Yeah, and, just a hint. It's good.
But it's great, and so that's one of the main focus areas right now. And I think Robo and I we were chatting not too long ago, and he said I'd like to spend the next 2 years really just trying to build this up and see where it goes. Yeah. And so far it's been we really weren't expecting anything, and I think we're up to almost 800 subscribers after 3 months, and. That's one of those things where we just kind of sit back and go, wow. Mm-hmm. And but that's what you want. It's the same thing when we started the forum. We wanted people to come to the forum, and we would sit and count and go, oh my God, we got 100 members now. Ah!
And how many? What is the Fwoosh forums? It's been a long time since I ever went to the bottom of the bulletin board page and looked at those numbers. What would you say roughly? What's our active...
Actual registered members, I think we kind of have maxed out around 6,000, 7,000. I don't even know what we're up to these days. I've lost count. We're about 6,779.
Nice. You guys ever thought of...
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
It's just a solid fan base, I call this fan base, but it's a solid base of registered members.
Yeah, well, I always wondered how many, and of course you can slice up the pie a million different ways in terms of people's interests, but in terms of action figure collectors, and I guess it's really across the globe because we sort of a global membership. But I always wonder how many there are, and you think about those 50,000 units and who's buying them, and the 10,000 units maybe for a quote unquote collector's product and stuff, and 6,000 or 7,000 seems like probably a pretty good chunk.
Yeah, I don't know. That's the tough thing. You think about 50,000 Warbirds or Miss Marvels, and you think about who's buying 50,000. There's only 6,000 members.
Well, in mass retail, they always talk about moms and kids, and I know there's a lot of collectors that scoff at that, and they think moms and kids aren't buying a $60 3-pack Target exclusive, but they actually are. They actually are.
But yeah, going back to other plans. So we've got the podcast going again, which is great. And I think the feedback on it has been good. That people want to listen to us talking about toys, and they want to be accessible. And they're pissed that we released more of the top 10 list on there, but hey, that happens.
Well, the
we
way
wanted
I looked.
it written.
Well, the way I looked at it was like a sneak preview, because it was like we obviously still posted it on the site, but this was just if you wanted to know early. You could,
I think it's a great way of doing it.
Yeah.
And then we've got video reviews that we're working on, and then of course we're looking at how do we expand and where should we expand.
You guys ever thought about doing a panel at like Comic-Con or New York Comic-Con or any of those?
Well, back when they had the custom panels, I moderated those for a couple of years when I was going to San Diego.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I was the guy who I was asked to introduce and moderate. I don't know if it was a couple of years. There wasn't many, but yeah, and that was fun. But then they got rid of the whole custom panel at Comic-Con. They needed the room for other things. Right. I've thought about it, and I know Julius Marks does a lot of that. I just don't know what we would moderate.
Right.
We've actually thought about getting a booth someplace and having a Fwoosh booth. I mean, that way people can come by. It's an idea. Definitely an idea. And of course, we're looking at T-shirts and probably trying to set up the T-shirt sales again. Indy's done such a great job with the logos on the sites, and we've actually put them on a couple of T-shirts, and we've been messing around with T-shirt styles, and that logo just really pops on a good T-shirt.
Yeah,
and so we've been thinking if people are interested, we'll probably try to do T-shirts again.
Cool. All right, man. Well, I've kept you a lot longer than we originally anticipated, and I know it's getting to be evening times over there, so I guess it's probably as good a time as any to wrap it up and say goodbye. But you'll be back.
I'll be back.
You're not going anywhere.
I'm going to be back. You guys are going to call up and say, "Oh, we got to have Pops because he just bought another $200 6-inch action figure. We got to make fun of him again."
Who else is going to buy that? Yeah, cool. Well, I certainly appreciate your time. Thank you once again. I will say to our listeners out there, as ever, send us your feedback. Find us on Facebook. We're the Fwooshcast on Facebook, and leave us comments. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, different subjects you'd like us to talk about. We will get back to having guests, as the previous Fwooshcast had, and the Fwoosh over the years has had great relationships with lots of different people in the toy industry, and I fully expect some of them to be coming back on the Fwooshcast. So let us know if you have particular.
You're going to New York Comic Con next week, right?
I am, and I was going to get to that too. I will be representing the Fwoosh at the New York Comic Con next week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So, although I don't know if I'll be there every single day, but I will certainly be there Thursday for any of the reveals or launches. I'll be attending Hasbro's night before party, where they sometimes have reveals or teases and sometimes not. It's kind of a crapshoot, but I'll be there. But let us know if there's particular things that you want me to suss out or cover, or particular companies you want me to try and pose questions to. Any of that stuff. Hit us up. You know where to find us.
Hey, can you do me a favor while you're there?
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to just go ahead and throw this out. Do you think you could talk to Hasbro and see if we could get Dwight or Jerry Javoyne on the show?
I will absolutely do that. And I've got a pretty good relationship with some of the guys at their PR firm. I will just to mitigate your expectations. At the last few years anyway, at the New York Comic-Con Hasbro event, those guys have not always been there. It's mostly been populated with the PR team, and those guys aren't always at liberty, or sometimes don't even have the information to give any kind of deep information or updates and stuff.
Jesse,
yeah,
Jesse.
Definitely. And actually Jesse definitely has been at those New York events, so we'll see if I'm able to run into him next week for sure.
Four Horsemen. Oh man, I can already. Should we start talking about who we need to book on the show?
Yeah, let's do it. But certainly, and Mattel this year does not have a panel at New York Comic Con. They have the last few years, but this year, even though they are rolling out some reveals this week over the internet and stuff, but they don't have any panels. I don't think they even have a booth this year. But if any of their people happen to be around, certainly the Four Horsemen might be around, because they have their own stuff that they are always putting out there, and they're based here in New Jersey, so I might see those guys. But let us know, because it's just little old me, and I'm first to admit I don't obviously collect everything, and I can't cover everything all by myself, but do let us know if there's particular stuff that you want to know or find out about. I will certainly give the best effort to do those things if people have particular interests. So you know where to find us on Facebook. You can also shoot us an email through Nick. Email is vb@thefwoosh. That's VEEBEE @thefwoosh.com. And of course, the Fwoosh YouTube channel, which we were just talking about. Check that out, because there's new stuff up all during the week. New video reviews, first views. There's videos even of older stuff. All across the board. Different stuff going up on the YouTube site. Anything else you want to throw out there, Paul?
Not right now.
All right. Well, thanks again for listening. We will. I'm not sure if we will have. I'm hoping we'll have a new episode next week, because it's Comic-Con. Our normal schedule, we would be off next week, but I'm going to talk to Nick and see if we can get something up on Sunday, because that will be the end, right at the end of Comic-Con, and there might be some cool stuff to discuss and talk about then. So stay tuned. We will let you know. All right. For the Fwoosh and the Fwooshcast, this is Tony saying, play nice.
All those who chose to oppose his shield must yield. It is led to a fight and a duel.